brought to you by the Consultancy Growth Network. As you'll know, I'm a big believer in learning from people who've achieved the things that you want to. It's why I run this podcast, to share the stories of consulting leaders and how they've got to where they are today. So when I started talking to Mark Jansen and the team at Consultancy Growth Network, it was clear there was an obvious fit between Climate Consulting and their mission and what they are building with their network. But you're probably asking, what is the Consultancy Growth Network? The Consultancy Growth Network is the leading community of boutique consulting leaders. It brings together seasoned consulting growth experts who successfully scaled their own boutiques, with rapidly growing consulting founders looking to emulate their success. Now, you might be thinking, who are these growth experts? What do they actually know about consulting? And this is one of the most exciting things that personally I find about the network. The team at the Consultancy Growth Network have searched far and wide for some of the best boutique consulting leaders to help their members on their journeys, some of which I have previously interviewed for this podcast, such as Don Morehouse and Augusto Negrillo. But it's not just the insights from these people that you will benefit from. By joining, you get access to their jam-packed calendar of regular in-person and online events, their comprehensive growth hub of resources, and their active Slack community. Through all of these channels, you can learn, solve challenges, and achieve the goals you want for your firm. And now, if that wasn't enough reason to sign up, the Consultancy Growth Network is giving all listeners to this podcast a special sign-up offer. If you join for 12 months, you join for that next year, you will get your 13th month for free, giving you that extra month to continue to build on everything you're learning and continue to benefit from the network. To sign up, just visit consultancygrowthnetwork.com or contact their partnerships director, Luke at consultancygrowthnetwork.com. And when you're talking about joining, mention Create Engage or Climate Consulting, and you will get that special sign-up offer. Hi, and welcome back to Climate Consulting. In this episode, I am joined by Gita Singham-Willis, co-founder of Cadence Innova. In this one, we talk all about the fantastic career journey that took Gita from textile factories to transformation consulting. And we dig in to how she, alongside her co-founders, were able to build Cadence Innova and successfully sell the business to Transform, all while preserving their culture and building a firm that stayed true to their values. We talk about a whole host of hugely unique and fascinating areas and things they did differently, like hiring working parents from the school gates and not your typical consultancy. We talk about their unique family model and why they rejected the traditional hierarchies that you find in consultancies. And we talk about how they were able to protect that unique culture through the sale, through the transaction with Transform, and look towards the future and where consulting is going in terms of DE&I and what you can do as a consultant, be it someone running a firm, be it someone running a practice, be it someone working in those practices, to continue to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion in our industry. So whether you are growing your own firm or you are looking at how to build or how to role model culture in your organization, I know that you are going to get a ton from this conversation with Gita. So with the intro done, please enjoy today's conversation with Gita Singham-Willis. Gita, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I'm very much looking forward to this. I know we have mutual friends in the Garwood team. Rob, in particular, has always spoken highly of you. And so I'm really excited to hear more about the Cadence Innova journey. For those, though, who maybe don't know you so well, it'd be great if you could give an overview of who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Right. I'll try and do this quickly. So I started my working life, I suppose, as a manufacturing engineer. I travelled the world running textile factories, basically, for about 10 years doing that from a manufacturing engineering background. So systems thinking, I suppose, is in my blood and DNA. And then I moved into Millennium Time, ERP consulting, because everyone was moving into ERP consulting at that time. And it also meant I could come back to England because I was kind of done with the done with the travelling lark at that point. Although the travelling lark was really interesting, has to be said, because we got to live in a place for a year. So you actually learned about the culture, you learned the language, you learned about the people every time you moved country. So after that, I sort of went into SAP consulting, ERP consulting generally. Ended up working for PA to start with, but and moved from consultancy to consultancy over a period of time, sort of getting smaller and smaller, I think, to the point where I was doing quite a lot of digital transformation work in the public sector. And I ended up, as I say, getting smaller and smaller, and then decided that it was time for me to move on and start my own thing. And there's a story in that, I guess.
Wow. Well, I think you've already teased with quite a lot, Gita. We're going to come on to the starting your own thing. I'm just fascinated. I didn't know the textiles to ERP change, and particularly the traveling, just because it's fascinating. So you would go and work in a textiles factory for a year doing, you mentioned systems thinking, so almost transforming the operation, sort of Toyota production system style.
So I went in as an international graduate trainee program. So you end up doing some projects based on your manufacturing background, and then you end up moving up. The idea is you move up the ladder, but at the same time, you move to a different country. So the way that it works is, so you start off doing projects in one country, you'd manage a line in another country, then you'd manage a bigger unit in another country, and you keep going. So I ended up, my last job was running a zip factory in Lisbon. So there you go, which was interesting because I had to do a lot of restructuring in the organisation. So we had two factories there. We had one in Porto and one in Lisbon, and I had to pretty much bring two bits together, which was quite interesting. The cultural thing's interesting. I had lots of weird discussions in Portuguese with the Minister of Employment and all of that sort of thing when I was at late 20s, and I was thinking, this is bonkers. They're letting me do this.
That's well, and I'm sure it will come on to the Cadence Innova story, but how did that, I guess, cultural immersion shape you? Because if you're changing cultures year after year, presumably learning the language if you're speaking Portuguese, what did you take from that time in your career?
Oh gosh, a lot of things, I guess. Resilience, I think, is the biggest thing. You're pretty much in that environment, especially in the textiles industry, you're pretty much in the back of beyond where the factories are. So you're coming up against things that you wouldn't come up against in London. So I think resilience in terms of being able to fall into something and make something of it. I think there is no natural friendship group at work. So you're going out and meeting people in the country that you're in, just trying to find a life and all of that stuff. So you have to be pretty self-sufficient and get on with it. And then you're learning about the work as well. And so it's kind of, it's a whole load of making you kind of quite proactive, quite independent, quite resilient, quite all of those things. I think that's kind of what I got from it, apart from some really good, interesting times.
Yes, I feel if we have time, or maybe after this, I'm going to ask you all about the stories, because yes,
there are a lot.
I can imagine. It's the only thing that zips makes me think is I thought they were all made by one family out of China.
Yes,
it was ZKK or FK.
YKK.
I thought that was every zip in the world.
60% of the time, and it was like we had 30% of the market, which was Optilon zips at that point in time, but that's probably changed. It's probably more YKK now than it was.
Yeah, and again, not for today, but I always look at products like that and think someone has got £1 billion business out of, that is a sheer monopoly on, you think, the amount of zips we actually have.
Yes, and quite amazing the different uses for zips that there are. I can go into that later.
So yeah, definitely one for after. But I think to bring us maybe to the start of the Cadence Innova story. And it was interesting what you were saying there around some of those things you learned in terms of the workplace, because it almost sounds like you had that as a business owner and someone running a consultancy, to your point, you're setting the direction, you're helping the team move forwards. And there is always going to be that slight difference. It's not the kind of friends at work in the same context of if you're, all in the same start group at a consultancy. And it might be the segue, or you might just go on to the origin story, but looking back, how did some of those experiences help you when you went in to start your own business? Was what you learned on the zip factory floor in Lisbon, those skills that enabled you and encouraged you to start the business?
To a point, I guess. I think the resilience bit helps, because you think, that you can pretty much survive any situation. I think that kind of helps. The journey between working for a big textile company at the time, Cadence Innova was quite a big organization, to working for different consultancies. That's another journey that makes you think, okay, actually I can do this. I can get there. I can do pretty much anything. And what's the worst that can happen? I mean, there's so many things that can happen. So I think that confidence helps you start something up.
And then what was it that led you and your co-founders to start the business? I know when we spoke, you wanted to do something a bit different. I mean, it sounds, Gita, like you're doing something a bit different before. So why didn't you just go back to Zips in Lisbon?
No, couldn't possibly do that. I think, so at the time, we'd gone into the digital transformation in the public sector. It was a really exciting time to be in that space because it was right at the beginning. There was nothing. So we were in this kind of environment that had a lot of potential. It was really interesting. It was good for the whole thing about purpose and social impact, which is part of my kind of ethos, I guess. It was really important to me. And then, so the reason that I guess we decided to set up on our own was because we wanted to do something that was not similar to some of the other consultancies at the time. So consultancy has changed over the last 20 years, but at that point it was very much, there was a lot of big consultancies who were sort of throwing people into organizations. We weren't sure that value was really being added. We weren't sure that it was really about social purpose. It wasn't necessarily driven by people who knew things from the outside world. So a lot of what we brought to consultancy at that point was experience of different things and having worked in different places, and also the people that we brought in around us. So if we were bringing in associates, it was about people with different experience and people who'd been in the working world. So it was a different kind of proposition and it was different kind of value. So that's why we wanted to do that. And I wanted to create something that felt different from the client's perspective. So I didn't want to just be seen as that consultant that comes in and, the old stories that we won't go into. But it is really largely about social impact, value, purpose. Those are the things that you want to do. You want to see that you're actually making a difference. And I think that's what we wanted to build.
And how did that shape those foundations of the business? You clearly had that mission. You clearly had that social impact purpose. How did that shape where you then took, particularly in the early years, that the business you were building?
Well, it was interesting because we started off wanting to do that, but with no sort of clear vision of what we were going to build. So we started off with a kind of associate model, as a lot of smaller consultancies do. We had a lot of contacts across government from the work that we'd done, and a lot of good relationships, and people would come and work for us from an associate perspective, and as I say, from different diverse backgrounds. So people with real life experience in government or in the local government were coming and working for us in those early stages. So that gave us a bit of a different feel anyway. We then also went out to try and create a bit of a diverse group of people, not just in terms of experience, but also in terms of all the kind of gender, ethnicity, all of those sort of protected characteristics. And we went out for women returners first because, well, my business partner had a good relationship with the school. She stood outside the school gates and recruited people.
Oh, really? That was hey.
Well, basically, I had conversations with a lot of women who had a lot of capability and had just had to give up work. And then they had friends and they had friends and they had friends. And we realised that there's a wealth of expertise and all they wanted to do was have some flexibility in the workplace. So you could give people part-time jobs. You can make that an easier choice for people, and you can give them the opportunity to be something they weren't. So, but you can teach somebody to be a consultant if they've got a consultant mentality. So if they are curious about what they're doing, if they are interested in that kind of social impact that they're going to have, if they're good at organisation, if they, and these are women returners who definitely can organise stuff. So there's a lot of inert, transferable skills, let's say, capability that people have, which is not seen, and they don't see it themselves. So in a way, what you're trying to do is bring people into a safe environment, give them the skills and the opportunity, and then they grow. And it was really lovely to see that happen.
I love that. And now, Gita, everyone listening is going to be running to the local school to speak to the mums between 3 and 3:15. But I think it makes so much sense. And actually, I'd love to dig into some of the practicalities, because if you're starting a consultancy, the easiest path is find 10 people who used to be at Accenture, because you can guarantee the training, etc. And to your point, there are clearly people outside of the core consultancies who've got these skills, and you have to select them and train them and deploy them. And I'd love to know how, particularly when you were smaller, so you didn't have, the infrastructure, let's say, how you did that, because you're still, running a commercial business. You've got to land these people. They've got to deliver great work. How did you discern who was going to have the consulting mindset? And then how did you teach them what they needed to actually be a great Cadence Innova consultant?
I think that comes down to when we changed from being an associate model to deciding that we were going to create something. We'd always kind of wanted to create something for a few years while we were still running the associate model, but obviously there was so much to do that we didn't have time. So we eventually had to go, okay, right, we're going to sort this out. So we invested in many things, but in terms of the people, we got a very good guy who was doing our basically all our people stuff. We got him a little bit later, but initially what we were doing was values first from a perspective of people that were coming in. So we would have a values first kind of policy of recruitment. So you have a conversation with someone, you can tell what they're like from what's it. So a two-way conversation. Is it good for you? Is it good for them? Are they the kind of people that fit? And it was nothing to do with skills and capabilities. Actually, we looked for people who just had interesting careers, to be honest. People with lots of diverse skills. Didn't particularly want consultants because they're trained into a certain way of thinking, actually want diverse thinking. So you look further afield. But it was the main thing that was important for us to have was that those people had the same values as we had as people. And this was before we'd even done the exercise of putting the values onto pieces of paper. And then we made sure that we could then teach them how to be a consultant. So I think it's about the things you're looking for, the things I've talked about, like the curiosity, the ability to structure things, the ability to have a story in what you're saying. So how do you construct an argument about something? Having that ability to do those things means that you're capable of being a consultant. And then we trained them in the sort of how it is to be a consultant, because people coming in from different areas and from the industry and had got all of these skills in their tool bag, but they didn't really know how to apply them from a consulting perspective. So we had all of that bit about looking from the outside in, being objective, you're the trusted advisor, all of that stuff you have to give them that context. And then you have to let them work within that context and see what happens, and make sure that you're there to kind of guide and support. And as you grow, you have more people who can guide and support. So that's easier.
Yeah, and if you're happy to, I might go deep on this just because I think it's such a rich topic, and actually I think you might be. I don't want to say the first because there may be someone before, but I don't think I've spoken to anyone who's taken such a proactive approach of not hiring consultants, or I'm sure you have people who've got consulting backgrounds, but in those early days, I guess just to some of the things you talked about. Firstly, you made the point we hired for values, but we hadn't yet written them down. So you got you and your two co-founders. You clearly have an alignment, and that's just kind of from each other. You have that feel. How did you then test the values fit for those new hires? Because again, this is a real hiring challenge for everyone. Are you hardworking? Yes. Are you inclusive? Yes. How did you test that?
How do we test for that? I think this comes down to the conversation you're having with someone. So if you try and have a conversation rather than an interview, you can test for things like that by talking about experience, about talking about what they've done, about how they've approached different problems. Do they talk about how they've worked together with people naturally? You don't want to ask those questions because that becomes very like, okay, I know the question. I'm a team player. Yes, of course I'm a team player. Yes, but you try and what you're trying to do is tease out what they've done without even. So you're just having a conversation with someone. If I'm having a conversation with you, I would be like talking about what you've done, and you'd start to feel what people's values are if they talk about what really makes them happy, that sort of thing. That will tell you what kind of person they are. If they want to if they want to make lots of money, that's probably not where they don't want to come to us. They might go somewhere else. But if they talk about the things they do externally, if they talk about how they work together with people and things that they've done and what they value in life, it is about what makes you, because it's as much what makes them happy as it what makes us happy. It has to join up. So I think it's about having a conversation. And as I say, I mean, this is not just me. When we hired our HR guy, who basically came to us because we had the values that he had, right? So the values of diversity and equality, equity, all of those things that were important to us, collaboration, support, being a team, no hierarchy, transparency, all these good things, that people talk about but you don't necessarily see. Those things are the things you can kind of explore when you're just having a normal conversation with someone. So he always has that normal conversation, or had that normal conversation with people before they got even through the next gate, if you see what I mean. So I think it's that. I think it's being able to explore that.
And just because you mentioned your HR colleague there, and again, what size were you when you hired this person? I
think by then, so we'd gone from, it was a bit strange because we grew as an associate base, and the associate base was up to like 100 people working at one point, and we decided that it was time to kind of do something about that.
You had 100 consultants on site,
and then we started employ, and some of the people that were associates became our first lot of employees because they trusted us, I guess. And then we obviously recruited more. So I think it was about number 8 or something like that. Yeah.
Fine. No, and I won't go. I was curious if he was an early hire, but it sounds like he was quite.
No, it wasn't the first. It was when we had somebody who was very people orientated as one of our associates, who sort of helped us sort of build the business a little bit, and sort of became one of the kind of directors of the business at one point. And so she sort of helped put some of this foundation stones in place. We needed a lot of help to do that. So which was very helpful. And I remember her and myself interviewed my HR guy to sort of get him on board. And it was really just a nice conversation.
Well, and then to that hire, because you clearly had a lot of experience hiring. If you've got 100 associates, you then grew the team after that. And it was just, you mentioned the other side, Gita, of, you give them the skills, you give them the guides, and then you need to support them on the journey. How, in kind of practical terms, did you manage that when, if there's, and I'm deliberately making this sound more extreme than it is, there's 3 founders, 100 people on site, and obviously your clients, they're paying day rates, they've got projects to deliver. You need to make sure that every consultant is great at all times. How did you do that?
I don't know. I mean, we did say, I remember us saying at one point that if we had 20 associates, we'd have to do something about it because that would be too many. And then suddenly we had this 100 odd associates and thinking, how are we managing this? I mean, it was difficult. I think we would build teams around us when we were all working at the same time. But we would, if we were checking on everything, but we would have reliable people. We trusted our people. You obviously have to make sure that you keep a weather eye open to see if anything's going wrong, but they would tell you if something was not quite right, and you would try and support in the way that you could, which might be more people, it might be more different scope, it might be sort of talking to a client and trying to sort those things out. So we do that at the same time. But I think it is to do with getting those good people in. We had all our associates were good people that we trusted, that we knew them. They would be completely honest with us and likewise the other way. So there wasn't ever going to be anything sort of hidden. And there's the point of like managing all these jobs is to get anything early. You need to see it before it happens.
Yeah.
So, you know that.
No, definitely. And I think speaks volumes to your values point as well. And I'm going to come back. It was something I was going to ask before I jumped on the 100 associates, because I mean, there's a whole nother Zips and 100 associates, and I don't know if they go together. But you mentioned around, so your co-founder had got this rich pool of talent in working parents, and obviously to what you said earlier, you're passionate about social mobility, about inclusion, and parents are a group of people who, yes, and working mothers or mothers in general. I've got a young son, and it can be a challenge. How did you, and again, looking at the timing here, the world now I think is much more accepting than it was. So go back, wind the clock back 10 years, 15 years. How did you actually position that with clients? And I asked this, you might tell me the clients didn't care, but if you've got a working mother who's doing part-time, 3 days, 2 days, half hours, how did you manage that so the client was comfortable with it?
Well, we always were fairly straight up with the clients about if we had people who were part-time, because that's the team you build. But we were quite good about setting objectives around what we did. So if we were delivering a project for, we did quite a few bits of, I'm just trying to think back to those days, did quite a lot of work in central government at that time. And if we had a project to do, we'd have outcomes around it. And as long as you're delivering to those outcomes, that's fine. I mean, yes, the client ends up paying a day rate generally in government because that's what they do, but they understood that what they were paying for because we would tell them who was working on the project and how much time they were spending on it. They were pretty good about it, actually. And I think that might be government. They were a bit ahead of the time in terms of being flexible about that. We had, I suppose, we had a lot of full-time people as well as the sort of part-time people, so that was okay. And I think and then we had people who would do that flexibility of hours, so you can do the school runs and you can still fit working around that as long as you're delivering what you need to deliver. So as long as the client is seeing that you're getting through your outcomes and you're getting to that point, that's okay. And they were pretty good about you didn't have to be as present in government as you did in maybe other places. Now, obviously, it's completely different,
Well, and it's, in a good way, I imagine, is now clients, it varies by consultancy, but everyone works remotely. We come into the office a day or two a week. And so actually, like you say, if you're a working parent, you come in on one day, the other days you're doing the school run or the nursery run. No one knows that. As long as the outcomes are there, and as long as you tell people when and where you are, I think you have to be fairly honest about what's going on. You can't just go off piece. But I think it's very different now, and people, whilst in a lot of consultancies they're asking people to come in more, which will be interesting to see how that pans out, because I don't think today's generation are that way inclined. Yes, well, there's a whole, and again, we may go
a whole other topic.
Well, there is. To your point, there's a whole section of the workforce who entered the workforce during COVID, and they all they knew was their spare room or their bedroom. I mean, there's obviously, with you're sort of very passionate about inclusion. I personally do have a question mark around, for people like you and I, where we have houses where I will assume there is a spare bedroom or a study. The proposition is very compelling. If I was back 21 in my shared house, I don't know how compelling it would be, but generations are different.
I think people who are sharing a house and are living in their bedroom are wanting to come back into the office now. And we had that. And when we were in COVID, we had that issue. We did a lot of work in trying to make sure that our people were okay. And we had a lot of comms. And we realised that a lot of people were in their bedrooms, not working. Some people were working on an ironing board. This is not good. So a lot of people did come back to work for that reason, just for a social but mental health perspective, which I think is a good thing. But I think people require more flexibility these days. And if you look at young consultants, they will tell you that work-life balance is more important to them than anything else. Yeah, they wanted a good salary, but that's actually gone down in the list to the second. Wow. Used to be top of the list every time. Work-life balance, more important.
Wow. Well, and to that point, and if we broaden that out to both the changing of the times and I guess the growth of your organization, we spent quite a bit of time on those early days. How did that culture adapt, or how did you have to adapt as it grew? I know we touched on your family model. I don't know if that was part of it, but yes, how did you scale that to keep the values true, but in a way that worked to the organization you became or have become?
So there's two things. So there's a family model, which we haven't explored yet, but if I explain that to listeners, we set that up deliberately. So we tried to have not too much in the way of hierarchy. We had people with more experience or less experience. So you go up the ranks if you had more experience, but we didn't call it.
We didn't have ranks? We
didn't have line management. We had assignment management. So when you were on assignment, you were managed about your assignment by your assignment manager, who could be anybody. So you could have a junior consultant who is assignment management of somebody who is more senior to them or more experienced, let's say, because assignment's very different. That the right people are put in the right places for them to work as a team. So your team might be managed by somebody who's more junior than you'd expect. So it's not hierarchical in that way. So the assignment manager would manage what was going on in the workplace. And then we had the family system to manage all the other things. So the family system was having a mixture of people of different levels of experience. And we made sure there was different levels of experience and different kinds of behaviours as well. So that we didn't want all the loud people in one group and all the quiet people, all that stuff. So you make sure it's a good mix. And it's about sort of 8 to 10 people in each family. And basically you could do things. When we started the families, it was used largely, we got them to do projects together, which was to help us build our internal structure, because we didn't have any infrastructure at the beginning. So there was lots of internal projects to be doing. So a family would come together in their time where they were working, if they had any bench time or had any sort of spare time, they would do those projects, and they would come together as a team and work through that. What it became is more of a structure about people supporting each other in their work-life balance. And so in the work side of things, those families would support each other in terms of development plans, what they needed to do, should they go for a promotion, blah, blah, blah. So they would talk about those things and they'd help people through as a family. And so you could be sitting in your family and saying, actually, this person in my family is a really good person to talk to about this. So I'll have a conversation with them. Or you could have a family discussion about it. So we had family discussions about all sorts of things. Everyone was in the family. And that worked pretty well to get people kind of supported.
Just a quick ask, if you are enjoying today's episode, if you have got anything so far from my guest today or any of my guests that you have listened to on the show, it would mean so much to me if you could take a second right now, open up your phone and leave a review on the platform that you are listening to this show on right now. Your review, your recommendation, and your feedback on what we can do better in those reviews means the world to me and helps us deliver a better show for you and for all of the listeners who come after you. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. How did you? And I just find it fascinating because I've never heard of anyone else who's had this model, and I'm a lover of learning different models and sharing them. And I might, Gita, just throw problems at you and you can tell me why they weren't. I love the idea, you've got a group of people, there's 10, let's say 10 or so. How did you cultivate the openness for people to have those conversations? So if I'm a junior consultant, let's say, I'm thinking of going for promotion, it's quite a vulnerable thing for me to throw out to a room of my peers. How did you foster the ability to do that?
I mean, that was through the values of the organisation primarily, because we got our people, the early people who arrived, to decide what our values were. So they came up with them, and that was fine. And they were all good things about collaboration and support and working with the client and all sorts of things. So that you've got that supportive culture anyway in your organisation. So people felt supported, but obviously you've got people who are slightly less able to share than others, which is why you have a mixture of people and families, so that you can find people that fit with you. But also, we also had the backup of the lady I spoke to about, who was the director of sort of people at that point, and my HR guy, who would support those people as well. So you've got different places to go. Obviously, they can speak to any of us founders as well. We were quite happy to do that. But there was multiple places for people to go if they felt they needed to have that open conversation. But actually the family culture was, because it was a mixture of support but also social, it became a place where you could have a normal conversation with anybody. So I think that's the part of it. You have to kind of mix that up a bit. You can't just be a very structured work thing, it needs to have a bit of that social stuff. So we gave each family a budget and they went out for dinner and all that sort of stuff through the years, as well as kind of getting together when they wanted to.
And I think, like you say, having those other avenues, and it does, we will probably come back to having that people capability early seems like a really big, something you did that really paid dividends. I guess, how then did you keep track of the families and make sure the tendencies that some may associate with family, because everyone has different families, and, for some there's family they love seeing, for some there's family there's not. How did you, I guess, manage those families to both prevent, someone becoming the younger sibling that everyone picked on versus
Yeah. So and each family worked differently structurally. So I can tell you more about the one I was in than I can tell you about the others. My family.
It's a therapy session now. Tell me about your family.
My family. Well, luckily I was never head of family, which was great. So we always had
a rotating.
That was a role. We had a head of family and we had a channel where the heads of families could talk to each other. So if we wanted to send out communication, would generally send it to heads of families, and they would pass it on to everybody else. So you've got that head of family whose kind of role is to be a bit of a pastoral care type person and make sure those things, the activities happening. And if you've got a really dedicated head of family, that's great, because they'll just make things happen and bring people together. Obviously, some families didn't have as much contact because their head of family may not have organised it as well, but generally they found a rhythm that they all worked to. But we did swap people around as well, largely because as we grew, we were trying to kind of make sure everything was level. So we made sure that we moved people around so things weren't all female or all male or whatever. So as people kind of came into the business, we tried to spread it out. But it is difficult. You can't expect every family to behave in the same way. What we did have, I suppose, when we were doing the projects is they had goals to do. And when we did do things that were about development plans or promotional things or anything that needed to come down as a kind of organizational thing, those heads of families would make sure that their families knew what was going on. So there was they had good communication, even if they weren't all as kind of bonded together as.
And how did you, and again, I'm only asking this for people who might want to embrace this. You mentioned they rotated heads of family, and I infer because you said you weren't head of family, it was not a pure seniority, or what was the criteria for selecting a head of family?
Well, I guess, it depended on the family. So each family could decide who their head of family was.
Okay. And
how long they wanted to be there, really, and if they liked their head of family. Wow. So it was pretty, it was whatever went. So I can tell you that my family, we had about 2 or 3 heads of families across the period, and it was basically somebody said, okay, if they didn't want to be head of family anymore, because it's an extra thing to do, and you do some organisation, you'd say, and it also is a sharing thing. If somebody else wants to be head of family, then okay, let's see if that's. But then it's that's fine. We either vote. Democratically, but most people are not going to not say no to someone who wants to be head of family, unless there's a sort of bit of a challenge. But then there's take it in turns, and then you make the time that you're head of family shorter. So how
did you then manage? And again, I'm just if we riff on the family and the village analogy, obviously each family you mentioned they have shared values and they do these things slightly differently, and take whatever country we live in, people have a shared values but do things differently. How did you keep it so it stayed as the Cadence Innova, village, rather than each family going off in their own directions?
Well, I think that's to do with communication overall. So this family structure was helped us in lots of ways to sort of keep people together and actually give people that support that they needed when they were inside the building as opposed to on client side. They'd get support obviously from their assignment managers otherwise. But we also had the usual 4 weekly team meetings, which were very transparent and open. We pretty much shared everything, financial details, everything, and got people to talk about what they've been doing and got families to talk about what they've been doing, so that all came together in that communications thing. And so we did what other companies do, is to have sort of, at the time, post-COVID, I'm just thinking post-COVID now, I suppose, like having days in the office together and all of those things that you do, social things. So I think there's a bit of a mixture of things that you can do in that environment to bring people together under one culture. And as long as they see you, if you behave in that way at the top, then it's visible. There was no hierarchical thing going on. We were all very friendly. And I think, there's a difference between advice and guidance and dictating stuff.
How did you manage, because everyone who's ever run a consultancy, there will be some people who fit the culture and are great at what they do, some people who might fit the culture but not be great at what they do, some people who don't fit the culture, and you will have had that. How did you approach that? Because again, I know the family is only the name, we're not talking your literal family, but if you're removing someone from a family, maybe it's not the right place for them as a business. How did you manage that in a way that then didn't cause other issues in said families?
You mean removing from the business full stop?
Let's say the business, because I assume if you're moving, it isn't a real family. So if you move family,
it's fairly normal. People, and that's also a discussion. It's not just you're moving one family to another. Would you mind if it's that kind of conversation? We didn't have too many problems in that sense. So we did, yes, everybody has these issues where you sort of make the wrong choice and somebody doesn't fit in for some reason. And we had to, that's when you have to actually be quite careful about quality of work, probation periods, all that kind of stuff. So yes, there are times when we had to exit people from the business, but largely the people that we exited from the business, the other people in the business did not disagree with that choice because there was a reason for them not fitting in, and people could see it. And people can see if there's a problem, and they'd rather that problem was taken away.
Yeah, no, and I think that comes back to your point on strong culture, is if 99 people have that culture and one doesn't, it stands out. And like you say, people want that change. And then to the model, just because it'll help my next question, you had come have this model, how long for? Is it, we're talking 10 years, 15 years,
well,
2 years?
I suppose we started, so if I think about Cadence Partnership was 2007 to 2017, Cadence Innova, where we were employing people, was 2017 to 2024, which was last year.
Oh, so it was 10 years as an associate model. And
okay. So it's quite a long time, we take a long time to do things.
All good things take a long time. And I'm asking this live, Gita, because I don't know. The Cadence to Cadence Innova, what was the Innova bit? Was that a merger? Was that
no? It was just a rebrand. We needed it's rebrand, new start kind of thing, and we wanted to have the innovation word in there. Yeah, so it was about new beginnings, I guess.
Yeah.
So
okay, so the family model. So if Cadence Innova was 2017, your family model has been 5 to 7 years, roughly.
2017 to 2024.
The question holds then, because it was, if you were going to say you'd only done it for a year, it might be different, but that model, I'm sure, tweaked, changed, evolved. And particularly for anyone listening thinking, Gita, I'd love to implement this, almost the looking back, when you were starting out, would you have put in place or done differently to get to the model at the end? For someone wanting to do this, what's their cheat sheet for it?
It was quite organic. I think when we put those sort of families in place, there wasn't a lot of change in the structure over those 7 years. It was more about moving people around, understanding sizing, because you're thinking about growth, and then how do you make sure that model's going to work for more people, because I think it gets more complicated. But I think the actual model itself is pretty simple. It is about mixing people up. It's about mixing people up and about being very careful about mixing people up, I think. And this is why I said my HR guy was he used to allocate people to families when they came in, the new people. He's very good at working out style, culture, so hence the sort of not all the loud people in one room, all the quiet people, not neurodiverse people in one room, all of that sort of stuff. He's trying to mix people up so they get different voices in that group.
And again, I know it's detailed, but how did was that just based off his skill and experience? Were there tests you did? It sounds like there's a Harry Potter sorting hat.
I think, to be honest, I think it was his skill and experience of talking to people and understanding people. Could you systemize that? Yes, you probably could. You kind of need to have a little bit of that kind of organic growth, because people get together in all sorts of ways. You'd be surprising how many people the people that do get together. So I think it'd be more about, you could systemize some of that from your stats, your diversity stats, or something like that, if you wanted to. And you'd make sure your levels were right. So your senior people, your more experienced people, and your less experienced people were mixed up together, and you had somebody who's so that you could do and make sure that you don't have all your sort of data people in one room, that sort of thing. But you still need the human element of that. I think you still need people to understand people, and a part of what we did when we were growing was to make sure that we we had the right people in the room. So it took us a long time to grow. In a sense, we could have grown a lot faster if we'd have been less worried about our culture.
But you probably wouldn't have gone as far. What is that? You can go quickly, go alone, or go far, go together. And you mentioned you had the families till 2024, which I assume aligns with the acquisition of Cadence Innova by Transform. And I'd love to turn a little bit to that. And actually, I know we were briefly touching on it before this. What led to saying, yourself and your co-founders, the time is right now? Now is the time to look, or did you even go looking? I don't want to assume.
No. So when we started Cadence Innova, we talked about what our future strategy might be, and we talked about all sorts of ways of growth and whether we would set up different offshoot businesses and all this sort of thing. And that story evolved over the 7 years, and we talked about it on a regular basis and looked at the sort of the value of the company from a external perspective as well, and what were we growing in terms of our value. So we were thinking ahead, but we weren't actively doing very much in that sense. It just got very busy. And I suppose catalyst time was, we gave ourselves a point when we got to about 50 people where we were struggling to get over the 50 people. And we thought, we're going to have to do something to grow. Otherwise, we're just going to go backwards. You don't stay still. So we thought about what we would do at that point, and whether we would invest or whether we would exit or to another, or put ourselves somewhere else. It's not really exiting the business as much as giving it a safe home to go to. And then we talked about whether there was anyone within the business who might want to take it on. So we talked about all these things a number of times. Took us a while to do that. We ended up then, we gave ourselves a bit of space. We had some various issues with personal stories and circumstances of founders, and that sort of triggered us to put in a managing partner to manage the business, to give everyone a bit more time to think. So we did that, and that enabled, I suppose, our minds to focus on what we needed to do going forward, and the conversations got more intensive after that. And by that time, we had a very good chairman of our board who was also involved in the discussions, and he was very good at keeping us on track of what we are trying to do. And I think that's useful for other businesses to know, just because I think that sort of governance and keeping yourself accountable for thinking about the future growth. It's very easy to get involved in the day-to-day. There's so much day-to-day stuff to do that you don't give yourself time to think. And if somebody's making you do that, then that's helpful. So we had those conversations, and then we sort of started to get emails and approaches from various people. We had a few conversations earlier, and then when we were having these discussions in real form, we were approached. And actually, the first approach was Transform. So through Next 50. And at that point, we thought, well, let's have a chat with these guys because we know who they are. And we bumped into them, along the way. And they sort of do the same sort of stuff as us. So, and we looked at lots of things about them prior to having the first discussion. So things like size, what kind of work you do, where they've been, what the contracts are, all of that stuff. You can look at that from the external perspective. So it seemed worth having a conversation. So that's why that started. I don't know if you want me to go into the next bit.
Well, why don't we? No, because I think to your point, there's a lot we can cover just in that, Gita. Because I'd love to touch on some of the structural bits you mentioned around the business success, because often in our world we focus on the outcome, the
the acquisition, the sale, but all of that was because you built a great business that had those structures. And actually just those two roles, the chairman and the managing partner, and let's separate them. Taking on a chairman, again, it isn't uncommon in a consultancy, but you're growing a business successfully. A chairman or woman is going to cost you money. What led you to take them on, and was it a point in the business that you said we had to? What led that, and how did you select the right person for you?
So this particular person was introduced to us as part of the investor visa scheme. So they would invest the money into us, and we wanted to give them the opportunity to be chair. They wanted to be involved anyway. So it wasn't a huge amount of money, and we paid that back fairly quickly. So that was good.
What is, the investor visa scheme?
Yes.
Just in case it's something.
God,
is that still a thing?
I don't know if it's still a thing. I don't know if it's still a thing. At that point, if you invested in a business in the UK, you could get a visa to get into the UK. I'm not sure that's not the case as it is now. But at that point, that was the reason this particular person came in. But also they had the credentials to be. It wasn't like we just picked anybody. It wasn't for them. It wasn't for the money that we did that. It was an opportunity to have someone who had experience.
And what was it they brought that made you say, yes, this is the person we feel we should work with?
They had experience in the consulting industry. They had and senior experience. They were meeting them was the main thing. So you had to meet these people to understand whether they're going to be the right person. Cultural fit, understanding our culture and being, up for that, understanding what that means to them, understanding how that would fit, and then the way they sort of approach things. This particular gentleman he had a very good approach, I think. It's very difficult to describe, but his approach was always considered and facilitative. He wasn't, and he would always check in, at the beginning of the end of meetings if he's done a good job. That was that kind of thing. It's very a nice way of being governed. But he had his red lines, as in he wasn't going to take any messing at a board meeting. He'd very easily, kindly bring us to line. So,
and I imagine you will speak to a lot of consulting founders earlier in their journey than you. And where were you in your sort of journey, size-wise, as a simple proxy when this person came on? And for those building consultancies, is there a right point? Is it never too early? Is there a size you need? What would your reflection be?
What would my reflection be? He came on quite early in the Innova journey. I think it's probably a good thing to have from the beginning because it gives you the governance and makes you follow some rules that you might forget if you're running a business. Structure, very clear lines. All of that, I think, is really important. If you are running a consultancy business, you'll end up doing lots of stuff that's in, the urgent stuff as opposed to the important stuff. And you won't give yourself time to do things. You won't give yourself time to do things properly. And actually having that person who's kind of overarching governance for you is helpful. So I would say earlier the better.
Brilliant. And then to the other role you talked about, that managing partner. And this is one that, while I know a number of consultancies who have a chairman or a board, I know a lot less who have hired a managing partner, and particularly where the business is founder-led, because there was three of you, you are the business. I guess firstly, so we are talking the same language. What was the managing partner role, or what does that person run?
Yeah, so the managing partner was there to run the business. So
the whole business.
Yeah.
So it was the CEO in a typical business.
Well, yeah. So in a consultancy, there is a kind of managing partner role, and we were very careful about what we said that was, because you're not just walking away with you as a founder. You have to still be part of that decision and part of the board. So but the managing partner makes sure that the daily operations run, that the daily things that are, whether it's the quality of a job or the contracting or the invoicing or all of that stuff, the end-to-end day-to-day management. Doesn't mean we're not all selling work out there. You have to do that. Everybody has to do that. And it doesn't mean that we don't have roles within that business, but it is that end-to-end kind of somebody who's going to oversee the whole thing. So if there's a problem, the managing partner is there to look after it. And each of us had kind of roles within the business that were, I less so, but my other two colleagues had roles within the business that were like specific. So one of my business partners was the finance director. So effectively had two hats on. He had a hat on that was finance director reporting to the managing partner about numbers, but also on the board. So it was kind of interesting hat.
And how did you manage, and particularly how did you get everyone comfortable and clear on that structure? Because to your point, if my boss is also my direct report, it's
very difficult. You have to keep remembering which hat you've got on at any point. And I'm not saying it was easy, and I'm not saying it didn't sort of go wrong every now and then where we didn't know who was supposed to be doing what. But generally, the point is you thinking about the different hats that you have and in which situation you are wearing which hat. So if we're sitting in the board meeting, the founders are stakeholders as much as anything else, and you've got to, and then you've got your, as opposed to your operational hat, which you might have on at some point, and it's discipline. It's discipline, and always sort of, we used to sort of try and say which hat we were wearing. I think that's important as well, so everyone knows kind of why you're saying what you're saying. I think communication is important, and trying to keep clear of like making sure that you're not treading on across lines that you're.
And how did you, in the build up to hiring this person, how did you get clear on what that role would be? Because to your point, if three founders, different parts of the business you're running, you're bringing all of that into one. How did you get clear on that, and so you could hire someone?
So we had very sort of, when we were three founders, we had kind of divisions of labour. Whilst we all sold work and did work, that kind of, as a consultant, that's what you do. We had three definite roles. So I was operations and people and quality delivery. And my other colleague was sales and growth, I guess. And the other colleague was finance and commercial. So we had very specific things and therefore looked at specific things in the business. So you can basically take away, if you look at that and think, well, which bit of that is a day-to-day operations? Hence, most of my stuff went into that sort of managing partner role. I ended up being more externally facing. So I'd be brand and DEI and MCA and all of that stuff. So whereas the financial thing is slightly, you still have to do reporting in, but you're still reporting into the board as well as a finance director. But he was also running a client. So, it's one of those things. You have to kind of decide which bits of it so you can put into that sort of role. So we did, the usual, created the job description, to make sure it made sense. And we had to go through it a few times. And when the person was in place, we wandered around that circle a few times to make sure we kind of understood where responsibilities, accountabilities lay. And sometimes it was a bit murky and we'd have to kind of work that out. You just have to talk it through.
And how did you, or how would you, if someone was asking to do the same, set that person up for success? Just in that it clearly, for everything you read here, you learn on people's journeys, having someone who isn't the founders run the business is a natural progression for size or for sale. How did you, or how would you set someone up for success for that role?
Apart from giving them very clear descriptions of what they're doing and making sure that I suppose the difficulty is people are used to the founders kind of running stuff, and therefore the channels of communication need to be clear as to why you'd be, without stopping anybody from talking to anybody. You need to make sure that the right channel's being followed to do something. So I think it's not easy to do that, but that's the start point, I think. And I think just giving them the support when they need it, I think that helps. And also just being very clear that when you're talking to them, to people within the business, that whose job it is to do whatever they're asking about, because some of it might be your job, some might be somebody else's job.
No, it makes perfect sense, Gita. And I know you kindly stopped halfway through the acquisition journey where you had transformed approach to, you'd done a lot of your due diligence. So almost now we're a year in, and so I'll let you place this where you want. You obviously were bringing a very distinct culture from Cadence Innova. You clearly decided that Transform's culture aligned and that it would be 1 + 1 = 3. I'd love to know how you have managed that in practice, because that bringing together, you've got your families, they've got theirs. How did you bring those, or how are you bringing those together?
In the process, I guess. We started actually, which was good, by revisiting the strategy, vision, mission, operating model of the business as it would be, the new business. So everybody sort of came into the room, that was the sort of exec teams, came into the room with a view that this is a new business, not their own business plus a bit. So, and we had to sort of throw everything up in the air in order to get back to where
and that was
we
exec
were.
teams of both sides.
Yes,
was it? Brilliant.
Yes. So we had a few away days, had to do that. But that really was about trying to create a different model, which would mean that it was much more coherent. So it wasn't just a bolt-on, because we could have bolted on our managing consultancy practice onto the end of all the other practices and left it like that. But that wouldn't really be 1 + 1 = 3. You have to kind of take the strengths from both businesses and see where they can fit together, and you can get more out of it. So that was the point of doing that exercise. And we created a new operating model. So we have to have designed something different. So people have moved roles into different things, not completely thrown away everything, baby bathwater and all that, but we have created a different model. The marketing guys have created a new brand. It's all of that stuff as well. So it's not just, so it's not, it does feel different, I think, for everybody. And they know it's different because it's got a new brand, partly, as well as the things that are going to happen, which show that it's different. We're in the process of setting all of that up, and it is slowly starting to kind of bond. So, but people need to get used to their jobs and understand where they are and all of that. So, yes.
And for someone, obviously, culture is so important to you, and it's been a core through your time. What have you done, or as a team, how have you managed that journey with the wider team? Because obviously at the exec level, it sounds like it's really collaborative. How have you navigated that journey of almost people are leaving a family model to a different model, or maybe they're not? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is a different model now, and I think again, it's a constant communication of what you're trying to achieve. So it doesn't mean, because we're using a different model, it doesn't mean you can't get the same sort of good things out of it. So I think it's communication. It's getting people to understand what you're trying to achieve, getting to people to understand what the business as a whole can achieve, and creating that excitement, I think. Because if it is truly 1 + 1 = 3, then that's something to get excited about. And I think the fact that we've brought two bits of the business together that are different yet conjoined is really helpful. So we've got all of the tech side of things now, and the consultancy side of things. We can really do end-to-end consultancy. We all think that's it.
Do you wish that there was a podcast just like this for your consultancy's marketing team? Well, if that is what you want, then you are in luck, because our Brand and Deliver podcast is exactly what you need. In Brand and Deliver, we dive in to marketing for professional services, learning from the experts at the head of some of the best marketing functions in our industry. You will hear directly from firms who have built and scaled incredible marketing to learn exactly how they do it. If you want to listen, or you want to share it with one of your colleagues, search on your podcast app for Brand and Deliver, or go to the Create Engage website, hit podcasts, and you'll find it right there.
So one thing I'm really keen to touch on as part of this interview, Gita, and I know you mentioned it earlier around your passion for diversity and inclusion, and something you've lived as Cadence Innova, is actually for our industry, how we can do that better. Because consulting is largely a white male industry. Most events that I go to in our space are white and male, often of a certain age. Where do you see, and again, you speak to a lot of consultancies, where do you see our industry at the moment, and almost what should consultancies be thinking about, be it hiring, be it culture, be it promotions, to broaden out that inclusion?
So I was chairing the DEI working group for the MCA for a couple of years, right? And then obviously I've been part of that that journey. So I'm familiar with the kind of numbers and what people are trying to do across the piece, across all of those sort of consultancies. There is a change. That people have changed. Whilst I agree that it is largely white and male, and the more senior you go, that's more what you see. There's a lot of work going on to try and change that from as much an attraction perspective as to what it is to how do you get people up the chain. We've still got a long way to go. And actually over the last 2-3 years, the leadership levels have not changed much. The amount of women in the consulting business is better. It's closer to the 40% than it was. It was 30 something, but it's still got a way to go. But it is the more leadership levels that we find it's difficult for all sort of minority groups, I'd say. So I think, what can people do? We've talked about opening up the channels. We've talked about attraction, and we've talked about how do you get more people into that space where they might even apply. So a lot of that is the apprenticeships, the degree apprenticeships that you can do now, a lot more social mobility into that space. Being more flexible in that space as well helps. And actually going out to job boards that are different from where you would normally go. Don't just do them all around. And people are trying to do that, so get people in. So at least you've got people coming in. What we're getting is, at the moment, is a lot of people leaving halfway through because they're not getting up the chain. So in that space, there's a lot more work to be done, I think, around sponsorship, allyship, and generally trying to accelerate people's journeys up. Because if people see role models, then they're more likely to stay because they see where they're going to go. Some of that is about leadership. What you find is that the senior leaders of certainly bigger consultancies are quite open, but that gets sort of stuck in the middle. There's the middle bit that doesn't sort of change. So I think it is about how do you actually talk the talk, walk the walk, all of that, and how you try and sponsor people into those positions where there are role models for everybody, and then talk about it, and then genuinely open your door for people to talk to you. There's a lot of things that you can do around the edges in terms of inclusive recruitment practices and things like that. But I think the actual change in the dial is when you get more people in the senior leadership, because then people feel there's a career for them there. And then you've got to decide if you want to be flexible or not in the way you work, and how flexible you want to be.
When you say have to decide, what does that mean to you?
I think a lot of, as I mentioned, that a lot of consultancies are asking people to go back into the workplace 5 days a week. Well, that's fine. But if you have got people who are, one, if you've got people who live around the countryside, which you will do now, and two, if they've got families, then you've got to decide if you want them in the office 9 to 5, and how you're going to make that easy for them. So that's just one example. There's plenty of examples like that. I mean, one of the apprentices that was talking, one of the MTA dudes that I was at on the panel, was talking about the fact that she only got her chance to work at a consultancy because they allowed her the flexibility to live where she lived and come into London when she needed to. Because if she was not able to do that, she would not have been able to do that career. So this is the thing. So you have to open the doors. And I think you have to listen to what younger consultants are saying these days, and younger people generally. One, they have different kinds of career expectations, and also they don't expect to be in the same company for the rest of their lives. There's a lot more movement. So what is going to make your place the place that people want to go? So there's a lot of thinking to be done, I think, in the future. And there's a lot of thinking to be done in the future in terms of merging tech as well. So that's going to change the way people work and how consultants work and all of those things. So there's a lot to unpack there.
No, I think some great points and some great examples as well. And you're right, that apprentice one, you forget part of it is the having the role at all, but the second part is how you make that, I guess, viable. Because, I mean, I don't know what an apprentice earns, but let's say it's £20,000. And Gita, I increasingly look at London rents and think,
how can anyone afford to live there?
And even, our this isn't a cost of living show, but even graduates in consulting, and not many people are going to get their little violins out for graduate consultants, but the rents in London are high.
The rents in London are high. And the good thing about, I suppose, where we are now is that at least there is a bit more devolution generally. So we have Transport has an office in Manchester. Who knows, we might have some other offices in other places soon. So that starts to make it easier, more viable for people in different places. But you still got to make that sort of, it's still got to be flexible.
Yeah, definitely. And just because you mentioned you chaired the MCA's panel, was there any particular consultancy or initiative that was either novel or highly impactful? Was there anything from you like, well, Consultancy X did this, and if everyone did that, they would see I loved your nibbling at the edges. It's not nibbling, like they'd take a bite out of it. Gosh,
if there had been one thing, then we would all have done it, I think, by now. Sadly, it is a bit of the just keeping going at all of those angles. There are some interesting things that people have done. There's a lot more work around flexible policies and trying to take from the Scandinavian way of living, I think, and try and make that.
Just for those who think the Scandinavian way of living is IKEA, what is the Scandinavian way of living?
Things like the sort of maternity policies, where equal parental leave, that kind of thing. Things like that. Things that make it easier for people. Anything that's going to make it easier for people to work with you. So policy-wise is helpful, and that's changing. Things like menopause policy, all of those kind of things are really important for keeping a diverse workforce. I think the problem area of leadership is a difficult one to solve unless you sponsor people up to that level. Now, we talked about targets a lot, and there's different views about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But however you measure that, it's potentially it's about not necessarily targets of numbers of people in a certain ethnicity that need to be in your boardroom. It's more about, are you targeting your senior professionals on their ability to bring people up? So it's that kind of thing that would help a little bit more. But it's, as I say, if it had been an easy journey, then it would have been a different picture. Done by now. Yeah. And then I think there's a lot of that's about going out to the schools and the younger people and telling them about it. Nobody knows what management consultancy is until they get there.
Well, Gita, this is afterwards. I'll tell you all about the Gateway Project, which is the social mobility initiative I run for exactly that reason. Is what I now present as a tall 6'5" posh white bloke. I mean, all of that was true except for the posh bit before. And I, like you, I had no idea what consulting was until found myself in London. And actually, we often talk about minority groups and think it's very extreme. But there are lots of places in the UK where if you don't have a tie to London, you have no idea that our careers exist. And I think you're right that awareness, it's I'm sure it's someone else's phrase, but you can't be what you can't see is such a powerful, perspective we need to change. So now I am all with you on that. And I guess, because again, you will have heard arguments and counter arguments. And so I asked this because you have run a business which has DEI at its core and has been very successful. And I suspect you will have had people who say to you, well, Gita, if I give all this flexibility, I have all of these policies, my business is going to suffer. And I would love to almost know what your response is for those people.
I think I'd say now your business will suffer if you don't have that, because you're going to lose your people, and that's the point. You've got to have good people, and to get good people, you have to sort of give something in return. I think there are ways of making sure you can deliver what you need to deliver for clients using that flexibility, and I think clients are more understanding of the need for the flexibility and also the need for diversity within the teams that they have. So I don't think you can get away with saying that now.
Yeah. No, I think a great place actually to probably finish and wrap and lead us towards the end of our time together, because I think a really powerful statement, Gita. And the final question, and this is one I ask all of my guests, and I would love, from Zips to consulting leader, I'm sure you'll have some great advice. So this is one advice for three people in this room today. We have someone just entering the industry. That could be your apprentice. It could be your graduate. 18, 19, 21-year-old just entering consulting. You've got someone who's 4 to 5 years in. You mentioned you were at some of the bigger consultancies. I'd know as a manager grade. And then you finally got someone approaching partner or someone thinking of going out on their own. They're at that leadership point. What one piece of advice would you give to each of those people?
So I think the starter, I would say, is try as many different things as you can. Open your mind, be keen, be curious, see what you like to do. I'd also tell them that no career is linear and they don't have to stake their life on a decision they make today. Explore, I think, is that point.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So the 4 to 5 year old, I'd probably say by that time you have got a bit of exploration under your belt. I would say, what do you really like doing? What's your focus? Focus and specialise a little bit just to get your name. You need to find out what your brand is at that point in time. And actually, if you still like doing it, that's another question.
Very important question. Life is long. You should do things you love.
Do things you love, absolutely. And the partner job is not dissimilar in the sense of what do you like doing? Why do you want to be partner? I think I'd be asking the question and I'd be saying, okay, well, have you thought about all the things that means to you? Because of being a partner is a different kind of set of criteria, especially in the bigger consultancy. It might not mean so much in a company like ours, but in terms of difference, but in some of the consultancies, a big difference in the way you behave and how you behave. So what is it that you like doing? If you're in a big consultancy and you like to go and sell and you like to get out there and win the big contracts, then yeah, maybe that's for you. If you're more about delivery and things like that, maybe partner is not for you. So be clear about what you want, and if you've got the energy to do it, and then go find as many sponsors as you can in the organisation to get you there. I think that's probably what I'd say. But I think my main thing is that, as I say, careers are not linear, more and more so now, and you can have all sorts of kind of fractional careers, as they say now, if you want to. And it is about doing what you really have a passion for. You can't keep doing something you don't have a passion for.
Very true. Well, and I think to your point of careers and your own journey proves this out. Often we think you have to start at one thing, and if you don't start there, you failed. And as you've explained, going from the zip factory floor to consulting top floor, that's quite a change of career, isn't it?
Yeah, and I didn't think that was going to happen. I mean, when I went into the zip world or the manufacturing world, at that point, I think everybody did think that was you just climbed the greasy pole and got to the top, and then you were CEO of some big FTSE 100 company. That changed for me as to what I wanted to do based on my life circumstances. So.
No, and I think that there's probably a round 2, Gita, at some point to talk about all these topics we haven't. But that, I'm conscious of your time, and thank you for today. The last question, if anyone wants to find out more about you, where would you point them to? Where can they go to find out more?
Well, I've got a LinkedIn profile. There's only one Gita Singham-Willis, I think. So there you go. That's how you find me.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure they sing that from the football terraces as well. But no, thank you, Gita. Well, this has been brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, and all the best for the rest of your week.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the specialist digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Now, for long-time listeners, you will probably already know who we are. You may have even heard one of our ads on a previous episode of this podcast. But for those of you who don't, here is a short introduction. At Create Engage, we help you create an effective marketing strategy for your consultancy, a strategy that will resonate with your target clients. And then we support you by delivering the campaigns you need to turn that strategy into a reality, helping you to build your brand, raise your profile with your prospective clients, and ultimately generate return on investment from your marketing activity. Now, I could tell you about many of the great clients that we work with and the results we've delivered for them. But instead, I'm going to do something much more powerful and something that I would recommend you do for your own marketing. I'm going to let our clients do the talking for us. If you are currently thinking about marketing for your consultancy, you're going to want to listen to this.
Create Engage started the process for us. They managed it end to end. They came up with some really creative ideas, and we were really happy with the work that they did, which meant that we could just focus on running the business. Not only did we start conversations with clients that we hadn't spoken to before, but also there was tangible return on investment by some work that we were given.
They've helped right from the initial shaping of the idea through to helping us work out what our end goal was. They've supported us with the visual identity and our positioning of the brand.
We've had an immediate expansion of our network and have initiated a raft of new conversations with owners, CEOs in target client organisations, and has led to us winning new projects already.
One of the greatest compliments, I guess, is that one of our competitors even said that they really like what we're doing with marketing and they wish they could be doing something as good.
So from our perspective, we couldn't recommend Create Engage any more than this.
I would certainly recommend Create Engage if you're a consulting firm. They really understand consultancies and the sort of challenges we face. And, I don't think you're going to get much better marketing anywhere else.
So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend Create Engage. They did a really good job for us.
So if you're looking for an agency that can help you achieve the results that our clients just described, then head to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can find out more about how we support consulting firms like you. You can download our latest ebook and you can get in touch to talk about how we can help you take your consultancy to the next level through digital marketing. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Climbing Consulting. If you have any guest recommendations, comments, ideas, thoughts on how I can make this show better for you, just drop me an email. It's nick@createengage.co.uk, and I really look forward to hearing from you.